I guess it's running.
Okay, well, there are your 3 books now.
Thank you very much. There's my questions.
Yeah, shoot.
What was a difference when we use an atomic bomb and a regular big bomb, for example? Are there any specifics?
Well, it's just the one is the atomic bomb is much more powerful.
No, in the airplane, you know?
Oh, in the
You're dropping
airplane.
it, for example.
Well, number one, your tactics had to be entirely different, because the scientists told us when we started working on this thing that if we went more than 9 miles away when the bomb exploded, it would blow up the airplane.
That's 9 miles.
That's 9 miles. So basically, and over Europe, why, we used to just go in and drop the big bombs and this sort of stuff, and then just keep going right on over. The target was here, and the bomb would come down, something like that. But with this bomb, if we kept on going straight over the target, I wouldn't be here.
So basically, they warn you. Did they show you, for example, movies of first tasting and how powerful is it?
Yes, after they had the explosion, the test in New Mexico. After they had that test, they showed us movies. No, I'll take it back. They did not show us movies. They tried to show us movies. The projector wouldn't work. Here we could make an atomic bomb, but we couldn't get the damn projector to work. But they told us all that they could, and they showed us a lot of still pictures and everything else, as much as they could about it. So yeah, we didn't go over unprepared at all.
What was supposed to be? What you're supposed to do? For example, when meteor condition over the target was unbearable. For example, not bad. Clouds, for example, out of nowhere.
We were supposed to, in that case,
Wind.
and our first bomb. You see, we dropped 2 different type bombs over there. We dropped the only uranium-235 bomb ever dropped. All subsequent bombs were plutonium-type bombs. But in our particular case, they told us that if we took the bomb up there over the target and could not see to drop it under any conditions, we should take it out and drop it in the ocean. Do not bring it back to the base with you.
So it was designed or destroyed itself, or if you dropped it in the ocean, what could happen to it? Or it should be
It'd
picking
probably
up?
just sink down in the ocean. That's all.
So there's no any
It is-
devices to float it or something.
No,
So
no,
just forget
none
it.
whatsoever. And in fact, the day after we dropped the bomb, a fellow there on the Tinian came into the operations office, and I was on duty. And he said to me, "Do you know anything about that bomb you dropped yesterday?" And I said, "A little bit." I said, "What do you want to know?" And he said, "I'm in charge of firefighting here in the island." He said, "If you want to air your airplanes cracks up on takeoff," he says, "do we rush in and try to put out their fire, or do we turn around and run the other way?" And this sort of thing. We talked about it a little bit and decided it didn't make a bit of difference.
Yeah.
But that's why they told us not to bring the bomb back to the base with us. They didn't. There was no way to make it safe and this sort of thing. And we would have had to, we'd had a very heavy airplane to land, very hot landing, and this sort of stuff.
Oh yeah, I know. You couldn't land with it.
That's right. And we only had an 8,500 foot runway.
There was any additional, for example, extra landing places, just in case. For example, you cannot go back.
Iwo
It
Jima.
was planned. Iwo Jima.
Iwo Jima, the only one.
Nothing on mainland, for example, in China.
No,
Iwo Jima.
Iwo Jima is the only one. Now, in the second plane, the second mission, because of the location of their target, they did land on Okinawa, because if they wouldn't have, they'd have run out of gas.
Okay. And another thing, what would you do if bomb for some reason didn't go? Just stay stuck in the bomb bay. What are you supposed to do in this case?
We'd send the bombardier back there to kick it out. And if he
So-
couldn't kick it out, we were dead.
No, you could just plummet in the sky and jump out or something.
Well, we could. We could have parachute out and this
So
sort of thing.
this is another
But
option,
we
yeah.
never even considered that.
Not
We-
even,
we
not
ne-
even consider.
We never even considered that.
Could
something
happen,
like
you
that.
know. A bomb stuck. And
Well,
like you tell me,
but it went.
projector doesn't work. You know.
It went perfectly. It worked perfectly and everything else, and we didn't have to do anything.
You have a lot of experience by this
Yeah,
time, of
yeah.
course, with the bombing. What was your most difficult flight? This one or somebody else in Europe or Africa?
Oh, or in Europe.
You were more dangerous. I guess.
Well, all of them in Europe were more dangerous. That's number one, except for the bomb and this sort of thing. But considering the fact we'd get away from the bomb, why any flight in Europe was more dangerous than this flight over there, because when you flew over Europe, you got opposition and this sort of thing, and you got all kind of fighters and everything else. My most difficult flight from the standpoint of navigation, however, was a trip back from Gibraltar back up to England with General Mark Clark in 1942, before the invasion of North Africa, because the weather was horrible. No, you couldn't get a line of sight.
B-17?
The B-17, you could not see the stars, you could not see the bottom of the ocean or anything else. And I just kept putting myself a little further to the left because the Germans were to the right. So I kept putting myself to the left and this sort of thing. And then to top things off, when I got up to England, they had a system where you get a QDM, I think they call it, and you call them on the radio station and they give you the heading.
What is it, QDM?
You would call a radio station and they would give you the heading to fly to your base from where you were. They gave me one 180 degrees off. And if I had followed it, I'd have been out in the middle of the Atlantic without gas in the water.
Yeah.
I didn't believe it, because I'll tell you why I didn't believe it. If they were right, I was flying into Germany and everything of that type. And if I were flying into Germany, I figured I'd have a lot more opposition by that time.
Yeah. What would be better, land in the ocean or land in Germany? In this case?
I think I'd take the Germans myself.
Yeah. What they do? How they treated, for example, after this bombing? How they treated the pilots that were parachutes?
Oh, the Germans?
Yeah.
Pretty good.
No, sometimes they shoot them. What I saw recently.
Well, every once in a while you'd get something that would be shot, but
Just
for the most part, the airmen that were shot down went into Luftwaffe camps, not the regular prison camps and everything, and they were treated reasonably better. Not a whole lot, but a little bit better than what the regular prisoners of war were. My next door neighbor over here was captured on Corregidor, and by the Japanese.
Marine?
Yeah, and he was captured on Corregidor, was a prisoner of war of the Japanese the whole war.
So they send it from Corregidor somewhere. Oh yeah, it's a death march, Bataan and everything.
Well, he was not on the death march, but he was sent up to Japan to work in coal mines and stuff like that.
What kind of airplanes you trained when you? By the way, how was decided? For example, you were volunteered or drafted?
Paul Tibbets. I knew Paul Tibbets very well.
In the beginning of the war,
The
when
beginning
you
of the war.
started.
When I got out of navigation school, I was sent to the
So you were drafted.
340th Squad. No, I was not drafted.
Okay.
I joined. I was going to be a pilot,
No, okay. So
and
you
I washed out. Then I went to navigation school. And when I got out of navigation school, I was assigned to the 340th Squadron. Paul Tibbets, Captain Paul Tibbets, at the time, was the commanding officer of that squadron. So Tom Ferebee, Paul, and I were the three of us that flew together, almost all during the time. So when Paul got command of this atomic outfit, why, he called me and he says, "I want you for my group navigator." And so I says, "Okay, I'll go along," and this sort of thing.
But when you trained first, what kind of airplanes you fly in the States?
Well, in the States, B-17s.
This one.
And actually, there's a picture of one around here someplace. The old PT-18, the Boeing, built by Boeing. It was a Stearman. The Stearman built by
Those are
Boeing.
big airplanes from the start, not like biplanes or something.
No, they were small planes to start with. They were biplanes,
Oh, okay.
small biplanes. I've seen models of planes that are as big as a plane I learned to fly in.
And basically, what kind of planes you fly? B-17, B-29, nothing else, or
That-
Raptors or something?
Oh, and when I was back in the States and this sort of thing, anything that would come along, I would fly in it. But basically, they were all C-54s, transports, B-29s, or B-17s.
B-17.
Yeah.
How do you consider work of map service? How do you consider maps you flight with? Was they good?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
both
Perfect.
Europe and the
Yep.
Japan operation.
Yep.
For example, I know they give in Europe this napkins with a map. Yeah, do they do the same thing in the Pacific?
Yep. Yep. Well, what
Ocean everywhere.
but what you're talking about there, the ones that you're talking about were strictly survival
Survival maps.
maps, and if you were shot down, that was the only thing you had.
So what they give you? A map of China or what? A map of
No, it's I think I have it. Well, I may have one here. Let me go look.
map of China? Or what was that?
Well, no, it was just the ocean. You had Tinian down here, you had Tinian and Saipan down here, then you had Iwo Jima up here, and Japan up here. So there's nothing there but ocean. But hey, that was your problem.
You know, I have at home this device that of Korean War times that allows you to distill the sea water. Do you have something like this?
We had them and everything else,
How
but
they work?
I never used one.
Oh, I know.
I never used one, so I don't know.
What is the longest flight, for example, from start to finish?
Well, that one over there was about as long as we had in combat. That was 12 hours and 15 minutes up and back. But we were slow. You know, the B-29 was not a fast airplane. And I've flown longer missions in terms of time in training when I was down at Batista Field in Cuba. And we'd go out over the South Atlantic there for 18, 19 hours at a time, just for training purposes. And if you got lost out there, you weren't fit to carry an atomic bomb.
What is the feel of a flight, for example, over the ocean and over the land? What's the difference?
Well, over the land, you could look down and see where you're at, for heaven's sakes. And the ocean, you were, unless you had whitecaps down there to read drift on or something of that type, you didn't have anything that would go by. And except,
Even if you live from a big flight, you still see nothing.
you see, well, you had celestial navigation. You did by the stars. You could get fixes on the stars, and that's how you did it over the ocean.
And with this airplane itself, 29, how reliable it was, and if it was broke, could you fix it on a place, or it would have to be sent back to States? Or how
Oh no, they had depots over there that fixed all the B-20. See, we had about 1,200 B-29s over there,
It's a lot.
and everything of that. Look, see this field here. Let me see. There's a picture in here someplace of Northfield on Tinian.
Yeah, I saw it from pictures from
Yeah,
the top,
and it's just there's nothing but on one field up in Northfield on
Well, for
Tinian.
example, how many flights before it has to be repaired or something happened to it? How reliable they were?
Well, they're very reliable.
Reliable.
Very reliable. You had to change engines occasionally and everything else.
How long it took to change engine?
A day.
Day?
A day? No more than a day. Actually, good mechanics could probably change engines in 2 hours, and this sort of thing. But you had to change engines occasionally. You had to give them the routine maintenance and everything. But hey, unless they get shot up and got a lot of holes in them or something of that type, well, they didn't need much maintenance.
How reliable was this work of mechanics? Was something cases that, for example, of negligence, something happened? To
They
the plane?
the mechanics were outstanding, and especially on the B-17. Well, on all airplanes. But our B-17, the mechanics learned to patch up bullet holes using the side of a gas can. You know, we'd get gas over there in 5-gallon cans,
So they cut it.
and this sort of thing. They just cut a side out of there and riveted over the hole, and that was it. And they were exceptional at what they did.
But the cans were aluminium too, or they were metal?
No, they're just plain old tin.
For example, what can you see from replace of tail gunner? What visibility was?
Oh, you could see almost everything back of you and back of you.
360 or 180 or?
Well, up for 180. Well, down more than 180, maybe about 210 or something of that type. Yeah.
For example, these people, you navigator or pilot's an officer, but tail gunners was a private, so sergeant maybe, yeah?
Enlisted man, yes.
How did people get to this school, for example? What decided? You go to the Marines, infantry, you go to the tail gunner. Education, what is it, just?
By guess and by God.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
So in the
Now
case
me, I picked out because I washed out as a pilot. I had a choice of what I would do, and I was at first I was going to get out of the service and join the RAF because I wanted to fly. And then some guy got a hold of me, some kindly old captain, got a hold of me and says, "Mr. Van Kirk, if you join the RAF, you'll be dead this time next year." Because he said your training will not be adequate, and they'll take you over there and you'll just throw you into combat, and you won't last. So basically, the way you were picked out, in fact, toward the end of the war, a lot of people who were in pilot training, navigation training, they decided they didn't need any more of them. We had met too many already. So they just sent them all to gunner school and this sort of thing. But it was strictly by guess and by God, and did the guy look like you when he looked at you or not, and this sort of thing.
Yeah, you never know when you get. But for example, can you, when you come apply, I want to be tail gunner, I want to be this, and I want to be that.
You can ask for it, yes.
But of course,
Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't.
same thing in the army was they ask when you, but send you whenever they need to.
Hallelujah.
Don't care about your wishes, right? How do you feel after this Hiroshima bombing psychologically? Like after regular raid, or like something you feel it's a beginning of history or something?
Oh, we felt just like a regular raid because number one, when we went over there, what we were trying to do was do something that was going to either shorten or end the war. And we were not trying to make history or anything of that type. We just wanted to end the war and stop the killing. And we were talking especially about the war over in China, Indochina. You know, about 6,000 people are being killed over there every week, even when there's no combat, no invasions or anything going on. So a lot of people were being killed every week, and all we wanted to do was stop the killing and this sort of thing. And the atomic bomb was the most efficient way to do it. So psychologically, none of us ever suffered any problems. We didn't go into any monasteries. We didn't go crazy.
Everybody knows about mentioned Israeli, pilot that was a meteorological plane that after war went a little bit crazy about it, feel guilty because he chose basically on his decision was decided to Nagasaki bombing because it's a better condition over the cities than over.
Now who was that did that?
Israeli or something, I forgot the name.
Oh, Etherly.
Etherly, yeah.
Etherly.
Yeah.
Well, now you have to understand about this. Etherly was crazy before the war, but he was a very good pilot. I saw Buck Etherly have an airplane like this one day because two props reversed on one side as soon as he threw the switch, and the other side didn't, and the plane just is whipped up like that, just like that, 75 feet off the ground, and he got out of it and landed. And he was an exceptional pilot, but he was also a little nuts. And after the war, he went completely bonkers, tried to rob post offices and everything else.
Really?
Yep. But hey, he's the only one out of the whole group that did that. He had nothing to do with dropping the atomic.
He's the most famous among some population,
Well, among some people, that's right.
Yeah.
But Tibbetts never went crazy. I never went crazy. We all had very normal lives.
What your instruction was if you was, I don't know, hit over Japan? Some airplane, some zero, whatever. You were hit. What your
If we were
instructions
hit?
were? Yeah.
Same instructions if we were
Going
flying
down.
any other mission. If you were hit over Japan and you shot down, you went down. Now, we did have cyanide pills we could take because we didn't think it was a very good idea to be dropping an atomic bomb and then be shot down over Japan.
So basically, for example, you shut down, not on a city. You have to go down. Can you? What instruction? Do you still have to use the bomb? Could you still drop it or just go without plane without bomb?
And that if we were hit and the plane was going to be down, every man for himself. To hell with the bomb.
No. So the one instruction. You still have to drop it in case of everything. In spite of first thing, you have to drop the bomb.
Nope. We didn't have. We have no instructions like that. If we were hit and the plane was going down, take care of yourself.
All right. I guess they figure out. But for example, there was some preparation. If the plane with a bomb just hits the ground, it's still explosion or not?
I don't know.
In this case, it was
I don't know.
in the hands of the enemy. What
Yep.
was instruction in this case?
Well-
Just what to do.
Hey, if the enemy could figure out what we were doing, that's tough luck.
Yeah. How many training? Do you have any training exercise or dropping bomb? Maybe model or something? Or you just when you have this mission before this, did you train with this kind of bomb, same size?
I'm
maybe
going to
not?
tell you a secret. Tom Ferbey and I, Paul Tibbets and I, only flew 2 times together, all the time before we took the bomb up and dropped it. Now we flew a lot, but I was always in a C-54. Paul and I were always in a C-54, going back to Washington, going down to Los Alamos, going to this place and that place. But in a B-29, training to drop an training to drop a bomb, Paul Tibbets, Tom Ferbey, and I were very, very, very personally untrained to drop an atomic bomb.
Why did they choose you, for example, a crew? Just same
Because Paul Tibbets was the commanding officer, and he was a colonel and commanding officer of the group. He was going to drop it. He was going to take me and Tom along because he trusted us.
Okay.
And he knew what we could do.
So this crew was assembled in place, not from the,
That's right. We're assembled in place.
in place in the.
Yep.
Okay, by this lower command, not from Washington.
Not from Washington, no. Not at all.
Question like this: what kind of electronic devices you use for navigation this time? Not mention this mechanical.
We had no electronic
No,
devices.
absolutely.
Radar was the
Radar.
only thing we had. And between Iwo Jima and Japan, you could pick up the volcanic atolls that were sticking up out of water on radar. But that was the only electronic device we had, and this sort of thing. And by the way, we were only 5 seconds late dropping the bomb.
That's good. 5 seconds. So it was exactly minute, hour, minute, seconds. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, it's just some kind of goal. You have to reach some goals. They put you goal. How education of the navigator was adequate to the the goals you have to.
Was my education adequate? Training adequate?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So
But hey, the first time I flew a mission over Europe, and I went out of England, it was the first time I'd ever been over 10,000 feet in an airplane. And I looked down and I thought, Jesus, that looks different down there. Because, like, at that time my training was not adequate, but by the time we flew the atomic bomb, I'd had a lot of additional training. A lot of additional experience, I should say, not additional training.
First flight, do you have still instructor with you, or you have a full command as a navigator? First flight, for example.
For a combat mission?
Yeah.
You're on your own.
Yeah. There's no
Not only
anymore.
not only did I not have any instructors or anything with me, but I had a bunch of airplanes behind me, all following me.
Yeah, and basically you have to stars and this device. This is it.
But over Europe, we use almost all visual navigation.
So
Yeah, you can look
maps.
out. Yeah, look out. There's a river. That's the Seine River, and that sort of thing.
So it's a maps.
you
this,
had all
navigator.
kind of maps. Yep,
And maybe stars in it.
yep.
Let's ask this. Question about Tokyo Rose and Lord How How, for example. It was I know Americans listen it, yeah?
Oh yes.
For music and everything. There was any restriction from command? You cannot do it, or
Nope.
so
No,
you
you-
listen.
When Tokyo, when our group got overseas, the 509th group got over on Tinian, Tokyo Rose, the night her broadcast that night says, "I want to welcome the 509th group to the island of Tinian," and she says, "I hope your mission is successful, boys, and have a lot of fun."
Same thing I was told by the guy who served in the Mediterranean. Same thing. They was telling next day of the
Yeah.
results of the action, and how do they know?
yeah.
They have spies, I guess.
They had a lot of spies around.
But how they have it in the Pacific? That's interesting. How effective was? So you're just listening for the music, or
Oh, sure. Nobody paid any attention to her. For
so
Christ's
they,
sake.
they didn't care? It's all lies and everything.
Nah.
Music is good. The rest of it,
Yeah, absolutely.
Who cares? The same as who was disgusted more, how on all the British guys or Tokyo Rose? What do you would kind of despise more? You don't same
Oh, it
thing.
didn't make any difference.
Oh, maybe,
You didn't pay attention to either one of them.
maybe a woman, you know. This Tokyo Rose, did it have an accent or have a good English?
No, she spoke perfect
I know
English.
she was from America.
Perfect
but,
English,
you know,
yeah.
What kind of myth myths, about your flight. White propaganda, black propaganda,
Oh, there's a
Something
lot.
that's not true.
Well, a lot of things about the flight that are on. Number one, the fact that after the flight, we all went crazy, or a bunch of us went crazy. That's probably the biggest myth about the flight, because nobody on the flight ever went crazy. Buck Etherly flew the weather mission out over Hiroshima, but he was just flying a weather mission, that's all, and that sort of thing. Nobody ever went crazy or anything else. And then there's a lot of other things, myths about the long range effects of atomic energy and all that sort of stuff that exists. But I think the major myth was that because we flew this flight, so many people died from it and everything, that we all went crazy.
How, for example, your life in the base was organized? Do you ever see entertainment, Bob Hope, for example? How life was every day?
Well,
How many flights you have a day, for example?
Sometimes, hey, I flew one mission over there, and all the time I was over there, I flew 58 over Europe. But it took me a year to fly 58 missions over in Europe. So you didn't fly very often. You flew maybe every 4 or 5, at most every 4 or 5 days.
What about Europe in the early days of the war? More? When you see the Battle of Britain, basically.
In the Battle of Britain, I wasn't in that, of course,
Yeah.
but the British were flying almost every time the Germans came over.
So it's
They did not set their own schedule. When the Germans came over, they fought. When the Germans didn't come over, they didn't fight, and everything of that type. And when we were over there, primarily we flew missions at almost every time the weather was good. But in England, the weather was seldom good, so you didn't fly very often. Now you get down to North Africa, I flew 4 missions in 2 days down there one time, because I was the only guy who could find one target. So I flew every damn day that we wanted to bomb that target. So it varied all over the place, depending on weather and everything
So you
else.
fly over France, Germany, and Africa, yeah?
Yep,
Italy?
in Italy, yep.
What about, I know some pilots that will crash landed in Switzerland that were detained, yeah, for the
Yep.
end of the war. Same thing about all this.
Yep.
For example, Ireland, if they detained there, did Irish let them run away or something? Or they
Oh yeah, Ireland, you could, they did not detain you at all in Ireland.
Yeah, because I saw some movie
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
So they help you get away. Even if they neutral, they still be on the
Yep.
side of more allies
Absolutely,
than,
yep.
of course,
Yep.
access. For example, if you fly over this neutral continent, you have to, over Sweden, for example, whatever neutral is, because you lost or something. They didn't try to land you or something, no?
No.
They don't.
No,
Because they don't.
no, it was very benign over there.
Okay.
In fact, I have a friend. He was flying P-51s. You probably heard him. Chuck Yeager, and his wingman. It was Bud Young, and when Bud was flying his last mission, they went just for the hell of it. They flew over to Switzerland, and flew over and just buzzed everything over in Switzerland and everything of that type. And then they turned around and came home. And there's a lot of people going on and just doing crazy things like that. Got it?
Yeah, looks like it works. Did you was in the army when Korean War started?
But no, I was out of that. I was already out of the service when the Korean War
So
started.
by this time they didn't call you back?
No.
One of the songs. is
You know
interesting.
why? Because I was a major at the time. They called all the people in my unit that were captains and lower. Majors and above, they didn't want.
There's one song in this very interesting song about this. So they call "Goddamn Reserve" when shit hits. In peace times the regulars are happy. In peace times they're ready to serve. But they call for "Goddamn Reserve." Like that. Did you have this translator? Did you give a translator in case of you land?
No.
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 So you have to.
We had some
German, English,
DC
British.
guys with us in our unit that could speak perfect Japanese and everything of that type. But they weren't there in case we had to land. They were there to go with us up to Japan right after the war was over, when we took the scientists up there to take them into Hiroshima and Nagasaki so they could assess what the bomb did.
So-
And they went up there and we gathered up the Japanese scientists and took them with us down there.
So basically, when you fly, if you land it, you don't have any
Nah,
means to
Nope.
communicate with.
Nope.
For example, you communicate with Chinese
Say
to
how.
help you. Oh, to help you. Maybe you have to do it yourself, I guess.
yep.
Nobody cares. If you drop, you drop.
And when we look at the Doolittle raid, all those guys landed in
Yeah.
China, and they were picked up by the Chinese. And they didn't speak a word of Chinese.
Yeah, they could do something for this.
Yeah.
If they know they're supposed to speak Japanese, they could give him little translator. Like, take me to your leader, something like that. How do you, while you, what do you call it? There's a flag system in Germany or Italy. How good it worked in Europe?
It was exceptionally good, and I have many pictures of a big old cloud up there and everything, and it's just black clouds from the
Like
from the
mush-
flak bursts and
yeah.
everything else. And you looked at it and you knew you were going to have to fly through it.
So basically, it's go all the way up and then explodes,
Yeah.
yeah, and the shrapnel hits airplanes and everything.
I'd seen many people. I'd seen one of my friends who we were flying on our right wing one day, and he got a direct burst of flak in the bomb bay, and poof, the whole plane just disappeared. I was never injured by flak, except I got a small piece of flak in my butt one day, and this sort of thing. And I covered it up by a Band-Aid. But when we got back to base, Tom Fairby, and we were always playing jokes on each other, and Tom says, "Dutch got a piece of flak in his butt. You ought to check it." So by the time the doctors got done probing for more flak, I needed a Purple Heart.
That's like John Kerry's Purple Heart.
Yeah.
Is it find it?
No, they didn't find it anymore. I knew they won.
And what about German pilots? How good they were?
They were good.
Yeah, too.
They were exceptionally good, yes. Especially the ones I was flying against early in 1942 and 43.
Yeah.
They were well experienced. They had an awful lot of missions and everything of that type, and they were extremely good.
I heard the German try kamikaze stuff. So they say have some pilots that's supposed to plummet into the B-29 or something, and some of them did this. Did you hear about this?
I never saw it, never heard of it.
They tried to recreate like Japanese did, but I guess they didn't have enough balls or not culture different. I don't know. What did you know about Russian pilots and the Russian army? What did you talking about this?
Very
Do you
little.
know?
Very little. What I know is, number one, we had an airplane called a P-39, and it wasn't good enough. Our pilots would not fly in combat. We gave thousands of them to the Russians. They flew them. They were great tank busters. They had a big old I think it was a 37 millimeter cannon up in the nose, and they used them for a lot of tank busters and everything. They thought they were terrific, but this airplane wasn't good enough for the American pilots. How about that now?
Of course, during the war and like this, you take everything, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we used to take a lot of those P-39s and they'd fly them over through Alaska, fly them over to Russia.
Yeah. They didn't originally make movie about this, like about this event, American bringing airplanes and they flying there. Little not like it was in the real life, but it was a movie. And your allies during the war, for example, how life of British, I guess, who else, was different, or French, different from your regular life, food and rest and everything.
Well, the British and Americans were very similar, except when we got over to England, like the food had to change because the food that they had was different from ours. It was horrible to be on British rations because did you ever drink tea made by a GI cook
Yeah.
in a clean garbage can? The
That's
tea
what
was practically unfit to drink and everything.
I did it for 2 years. I was in the army. I know.
But then the other thing was that some of the British rations were beef and kidney stew and oxtail soup. And we get down in Africa there for a while, and Christ, we existed for 2 weeks with nothing. beef and kidney stew one meal, oxtail soup the next, beef and kidney stew, oxtail soup, and this one. It was the rations were horrible and everything. They were not near as good as our rations, but the British people were very friendly and everything of that type, and we made a lot of friends over in England.
Did American propaganda officers, whatever is it, worked among how to behave with the British people and everything? So it's
no.
just you're supposed to do whatever
Yep, back to
you
it.
know what to do.
Yep.
You're in the army now.
Exactly right.
For example, if somebody in crew died or wounded, how it was transfer was made? He was supposed to be returned back in the same crew when he recovered, or
No.
no?
Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. It all depended on where they were. And I'll tell you a little story. In our B-17, well, I'll show you the guy here for Christ's sakes. Where's my picture of the crew of the B-17? I thought I had it here. Here we are. This is that was our crew on the B-17.
Mm-hmm.
That right there. And there's one guy here, was our tail gunner, Willie Titsworth. This guy right here.
Mm-hmm.
And the plane, you know, when the planes get in formation and everything, they're very close together. And the flight engineer of a crew flying behind us was injured one day.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that Willie Titsworth is a guy who shot him,
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of thing. And when he got back, when he got well again, got back on the flying status, he came back out. He says, "I will never fly behind Willie Titsworth again." He says, "I'll only fly on Paul Tibbets's crew." So we had an opening because this guy got a venereal disease and was kicked out. So we had an opening, so we put him on our crew.
What, kicked out of the army, or
No, kicked out. I don't know. Taken off of flying status. I don't know. I never knew what happened to him and this sort of thing. But he was taken off of flying status and put on non-flying status over there. So basically, Herman Haig became our flight engineer, and he became a good friend of ours all and everything at that time. But the story goes, he was shot by Willie Titsworth, and he'd never fly behind Willie again.
So it was happens that you can shot or bomb your, of course, like I guess like in the ground, you can kill your own.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You had to be careful where you're shooting.
There was it couldn't happen. For example, when you fly in a huge formation, some bomb could fall on a lower airplane.
It could happen, and it did sometimes.
That's what I guess.
Hey,
some
when you get 600 planes up there or something, almost anything can happen.
Yeah.
Our biggest concern was getting 600 airplanes all together into a big formation over the confined space over England. Mm-hmm. The weather was not bad and everything of that type. Sometimes you'd pull up through a cloud and right above you is another airplane. And everything of that type.
Yeah, when you see documentaries, it's just scary sometimes.
That's
How
right.
the hell they train them to fly like this?
But hey, they were doing the best they knew how. They weren't trained to fly like they were trained to fly properly, but they were trained in good weather. They weren't trained to fly in lousy weather and everything of that type.
I guess too dangerous. I guess to try
Yep.
in bad weather you can lose. Did you ever saw any Soviet soldiers during the war?
Never did.
Never see
Nope.
any.
Because I was over in England, Africa. I finished my 58 missions over there, and I was home.
58 missions.
58 missions over in
After
England.
this, you go home forever, or just for the
Well,
rest?
I went home until Paul Tibbets called me to go back
Ah, okay.
over again.
So you don't have to. This is it. You did your duty. Yeah.
I did my work on my
59.
tour.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I heard it's 25 or something was it
Well, it was in England.
in England.
But then by that time I was down to Africa. And by the time they established the number of tour missions that would make up a tour down there, I had already had 58.
So basically, less dangerous it became because
That's right.
flag.
Africa was less
Like-
dangerous in England.
And then
That's
it's
it.
just keep increasing and increasing.
Yep.
But basically, if you finish it, you can go home and become civilian if you
No,
want.
no, you can't become a civilian. You can go home and
You're still in
you're in some duty in the army back
Okay,
here.
okay.
For example, I was
In the fray
commanding,
somewhere.
I was commanding officer of a training squadron, training more navigators. Until Paul called me to go on the final night.
When you finished with Europe, when was that? 44, 45?
43 was at the
43. By
40
43, you already fly 59
by
minutes.
43, I already had my mission. Then was back here.
Okay, so from 43 to 44, you were in the.
I was over here at Monroe, Louisiana, at a navigation school.
Yeah, you have a lot of experience, of course. That's what everybody do, I guess. Took the best pilots and send them back to train.
That's
them,
right,
so,
yeah.
Because otherwise, how they can learn?
That's where the Japanese made their mistakes.
Yes.
Their pilots got shot down. They didn't have any good replacements.
And sometimes, from the beginning, they even use good pilots for kamikaze because they thought it's
Yeah,
a
yep.
noble thing. I read that you fly with Eisenhower too in one of the missions.
Yep.
Yeah. What kind of man he was? Was a
Great guy.
great guy.
He was only a 2-star general at that time. But we took him from England down to North Africa, and then down to North Africa we flew him around a lot and everything of that type. And he was just a regular guy and this sort of thing. I have to tell you, this fellow right here, Willie Titsworth, right here,
Same guy.
he claims he was the only guy that ever peed on a general.
How was that?
Well, he's using the relief tube, and the relief tube was plugged up, so it splashed out and splashed onto Eisenhower.
So you're sitting next to the toilet?
Yeah.
What kind of toilet was in there?
Well,
Where
we
is
just
it?
had a relief tube, that's all.
Ah, relief. There was no room like in modern
No,
place.
no. You didn't have a toilet like that the 747 has. And the other thing, I can tell you all kind of stories like that. But there was a famous photographer named Margaret Birkwhite, and she was over in England in 1942, and she was over there photographing us, getting the air formations together and everything like that. And we assigned her to one of the pilots to fly, and she was up flying with him. She's just getting over here, getting pictures of the formation there, and he wasn't doing what she said. So all of a sudden she was hitting him on the shoulder and saying, young man, you're not doing what I tell you to do," and this sort of thing. So he turned around and looked and he says, "Ma'am, if you would talk onto the intercom instead of into the P tube, I could hear you."
And what is her reaction was? For example, what a reaction was? What during the situations that when you fly over Europe and Africa, basically you have to fly, deliver a bump, and went back.
Yep.
What if something? Do you have any specific instruction for something unusual could happen?
Hey, if you got shot down, you got shot down. That's all.
It's a normal situation.
Yeah.
For example, yeah, you have to decide for yourself on a whatever. If somebody went crazy, for example.
If somebody went crazy, if he jumped out of the airplane, that was his trouble. If he went crazy and the people could hold him down and keep him under control and everything of this type, they did that until they got back to England and landed.
I guess it could happen. Could you kill him?
Sure. Yep.
For example, if a danger is a
Well,
mission?
you could if necessary, absolutely. You could do any. The pilot on those things was little God, and he could make any decision he wanted to.
Like ship captains.
Yep.
Ship captains,
Yep.
same thing. You don't have any, of course. I don't remember it exists any cases of treason, for example, among pilots.
Nope.
Somebody landed, and
We were a little bit suspicious of the first guy shot down over there in our group, a fellow named Lipsky. And he later turned and became friendly with the Germans, we understand. And it would help the Germans a little bit, and he went down under very suspicious circumstances. He just kind of floated down and made a good landing on a sandbar in the Seine River. And this sort of thing. So
was some
we were
investigation?
suspicious about that, but no.
There was any investigation after this, after
No.
the war?
None that I know of. None that I know of.
Do you? What about any spy activities? German or Italian, in England.
In England, we never even thought of spies.
How do they know about this, Lord? How and Tokyo Road?
I have
is
no
so
idea.
interesting.
They had them. They obviously had them. Now, coming back to the atomic bomb, we had real problems with the Russians on the spying about the atomic bomb. Because at that time, England and we were all together, and the Russians were on the outside looking in, so to speak. And in fact, Harold, what's his last name?
Who?
A fellow named, he became the fourth director of our Los Alamos laboratory.
Oh, I remember one Oppenheimer.
Anyhow, he got his doctor's degree, became the fourth director of that, and come the days of Glasnost, well, he went back over to Russia to meet his counterparts in the atomic program in Russia. And when it was introduced to the Russians, why they said, Dr. Agnew is his name, Harold Agnew. Dr. Agnew, we would like to congratulate you, not only on making the first atomic bomb, but the first 2 atomic bombs, yours and ours.
So it's a during, okay, I got yours and ours. Yeah, I know that it was help because I heard this scientists thought it would be better for the peace if both
That's right.
will have it, and it's kind of.
And all the secrets came out of the academic program.
They helped because
they never came out.
in Russia they have own program working
Yeah,
on this
that's
side,
right,
but
yeah.
I guess they didn't have as much money as America have to because they have a war right
That's
there
right,
at home.
yeah.
That's different. That's why they didn't have planes like this. I know
That's
that
right.
one of the B-29 was landed. Russians make exact copy,
Yes.
but in metrical system. There was a anecdote stories that there was a bullet holes in somewhere, and they make bullet holes, so that's the holes that's supposed to something. I don't know, true or not, but it was
It's true. It was
anecdotal
true.
story.
Yeah.
There is any planes, for example, when you people fly in the Pacific to land in Soviet Union. I know they have to be detained because the
Yes,
Soviet was not in the war.
some of them did. Some of the Doolittle Raiders, like one crew on the Doolittle Raiders landed in the Soviet Union, and they were detained for several years, I think, before they were finally released, and everything of that type. And then there were several B-17, B-29s that were down up in the Soviet Union also.
Do they let them run away or they keep them, the pilots?
They interned all of them. The Russians did anyhow.
Because at the beginning of the war, understand, they didn't want to provoke Japanese because they have such a bad case in the
Right,
West.
yeah.
But
That's
later
right.
in the war, maybe it's changed a little bit, of course. I know that's in the end. How you, for example, after second bomb dropped, you know that Soviet Union declared war on Japan in 1 week. It's how this reaction was. Was it meaning something to Americans or not?
It didn't mean much. By that time, we thought the war was over anyhow,
Yeah.
and this sort of thing. So it didn't really mean a whole lot, except that if you were higher up in the government, it probably meant something to you because, you know, if you were, say, President Truman, you did not want the Soviets invading Japan and getting part of that land, and then you'd have a divided country like Germany was after the
I
war.
guess they didn't want this, of course, but one of the demands or agreements in the Potsdam Conference was the Soviet Union
That's
enter
right.
the war in
That's
3
right.
months because
We
more help better.
Yeah, we didn't have the atomic bomb at that time.
Yeah, back to sticks and 46, you know, nobody know when war was
That's
over
right.
in Japan.
That's right.
So back to heaven in 47 or something like that. After 45, how do you, after bombing, you still thinking when war will be over? This year or?
We thought when we were coming back from Hiroshima, we were talking about it. We thought the war was over right almost immediately.
After this, when you see
Yeah.
this explosion?
We just said, hey, the Japanese cannot stand up to such force and that sort of thing. But they did, and I think the reason they did is, you know, I said that we dropped the only uranium-235 bomb. The Japanese atomic program, and they had one, was all based on using U-135, uranium-135. And based on that program, everyone thought that they want people to only make one bomb because they didn't have enough uranium-135, U-235. So they all only thought they'd only be able to make one. So it wasn't until we dropped the second one, and they knew we could make more than one, that they started getting serious about talking about peace.
And when an explosion hits, how it was surprise for you still after everything you know about it? Was it a surprise?
Oh yes, it was bigger than we ever thought. Bigger than we ever thought.
Interesting enough, you know, with this anti-war propaganda, they always mention this Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Dresden. But for example, in Tokyo bombing, or Hamburg bombing,
That's right.
same, even
Yeah.
more, and nobody
That's
cared.
right.
On explanation,
Just took more airplanes, that's all.
on explanation, it was end of the war. It was not necessary.
That's
It was not over even after second bombing because they still. I saw recently Japanese movie. Japanese maybe the last day of the war. They would attempting to revolt against to take power and continue the war. Some crazy.
That's right.
So I guess it's a war is not over until it's over. Same
Yes.
thing stupid people tell. And Stalin shouldn't took Berlin because lots of people were killed.
Yeah.
He just surrounded and starved to death. It doesn't work like this. War
No.
should be over any means. And sooner better because machines still working
That's right. Yep.
for nothing. After the war, for example, with all these beautiful machines, how they were, treated, just destroyed or American tried
Most
to
of them
sell it?
destroyed. Almost all the B-29s, they had big machines out in Phoenix, Arizona, and they had, the big choppers. They just put the plane in and they chop it right in half, in
No,
pieces.
Of course, you saw this movie, Best Years of Our Lives. Like
Yep.
in the end, this big field. So they didn't try to convert them to civilian or
Nope.
no.
They weren't good for civilian. They were too small.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Now, Boeing did. They took the B-29, they made the C-97 out of it, put two fuselages, one on top of the other. So they made a civilian version of it. But it didn't last long because the jet engines came along and, yeah.
Did they try to sell it?
No.
The countries it was top secret or something.
Yeah.
And no countries will
It was
buy
obsolete
it,
by
of
that
course.
time.
Yeah. No, some countries still buying in Africa maybe T-34 tank or something, but they didn't have money for this obviously, and no need. Why do you need a bomber, strategic bomber in Africa?
Well, you go out here to Lockheed now and you look at that F-22 there.
I live just next to the Lockheed,
Is
by
that
the
right?
way.
Oh, I go in there and they let me get into the simulator for the F-22. If we had had 8 of them in 1942, we wouldn't have had any war.
Yeah, it's
You could have shot down every other airplane, just like that.
Did you see this movie made in '85, this big fleet dropped down in time and appears in 41?
Oh, yeah,
Remember?
yeah.
They could do big damage, but unfortunately, I was waiting. Well, they went back.
Yep.
I would love to see it. One and Yorktown, ones that brought bomb to. Did they met on during the war?
Oh, the cruiser Indianapolis?
Cruise. They went to this island and dropped the bomb or somewhere else.
No, they brought it right to Tinian.
So it's
They brought it to Tinian.
so this island was okay.
And there are pictures in here of the Indianapolis unloading the bomb in Tinian. In that book.
What unlucky ship, famous but unlucky.
Yep. Yep.
There's a
And,
story.
I see those guys. In fact, do you ever go up to Reading, Pennsylvania to the World War II reenactment? You
No.
should. You should. It's quite a reenactment. It's in Reading, Pennsylvania, Reading, Pennsylvania. When I go up there, I will be sitting right next to a member of the crew of the Indianapolis. He's sitting there. He has his book, and I have this, and we're signing books together. But there's all kind of things up there at that Reading show.
Oh, you never know. Of course, a sailor could think about death like shark eating, but still, 5 days in the sea and all this,
Yep.
it's horrible.
Yep.
I don't know what you choose, days like this or...
And the Navy didn't even know they were missing.
Yes, they didn't have time to send message or something. How they were recognized by submarine or something, or how they were found?
They were found by a patrol plane out just watching, and it just saw big oil slicks, so it followed the oil slicks, and then saw people in the water. That's how they were found. Just by dumb luck.
I just heard a couple of days ago Australians find the Sydney place, the Sydney, the cruiser dropped down in 41 or something and found it. Bending like this on the ground. It's lots of airplanes on the bottom.
Oh, there's
And
all
the
kinds
ships
of
over there.
And but they're digging them out too. They got Glacier Girl coming out. If you look behind you, yeah. So, see that B-17 back behind you there on the floor? Mm-hmm. That P-38 flying alongside of it, that's Glacier Girl. That's the one they dug out of the ice. We put it on the ice up in Greenland.
When it was filmed, it's Stone Mountain.
That was about 2 years ago. Year and a half, 2 years
It's
ago.
original period airplanes,
Yep.
not reproduction, I don't think.
No, that was there's a lot of B-29s have been rebuilt and to fly.
Yeah, I remember once you can fly $300 and you can fly. I don't remember
Yep.
why I didn't go. $300 you can fly and see
Yep.
something. So how many of them left still functional?
B-17s,
The 17s and 29s.
there's one B-29 still flying. That's Fifi. But there's another one almost ready to fly. We've pulled it out of the desert about 10 years ago. Yep.
Bolivia?
No, California,
California
California.
over there.
And it's been refurbished and everything. All we need is $2 million to put new engines on it. And we have a good airplane to fly, so that would be two of them. But there are probably a dozen or more B-17s flying around.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
more of them made.
Yeah. A lot more than made. Then they're a lot cheaper to refurbish than everything else. That B-17, B-29, you get to refurbishing it, you know. It's a pressurized airplane. The engines are much more complicated and everything like that.
On the islands, four posts, you know, what do you call it? How food was,
Great.
you don't have a shortage, nothing on it?
No.
Delivery
On
and everything?
Tinian, our mess officer had been a manager for a big hotel up in New York before the war. And he was a good mess officer. And what they did on Tinian, they sent tractors over and everything else. They put the natives there that they had captured to work farming the island. And they grew good fresh vegetables and everything else. And you take a bottle of whiskey down there and give the people a bottle of whiskey, they give you all the fresh vegetables you wanted.
Yeah.
And we had a great mess hall.
You were not on New Guinea?
No, I was not on
You know,
it.
like these savages
Oh.
worship airplanes, you
Yeah.
know, they bring them some
Yeah.
good stuff
Well,
from the sky.
yeah.
This people was not so savage.
No.
So
They were
more
the
advanced.
they had been colonized by the Japanese.
A long time before.
Yeah.
This island was Japanese or somewhere else?
There was Japanese before the war, and it's now a protectorate of this. The people that live there now, the island is being returned to the native people. I'd go over there and try. I could not own land over there on the island of Tinian, but it's only the native people can. Last time I was over there was about 3 years ago, and there are now more cattle on the island of Tinian than there are people.
Reasonable. How big is it?
Oh, it's maybe 20 by 15.
Just enough place to
Yes.
I guess, land it. Okay, I have, I guess, all questions that people wanted to know. Where were you when the wars ended?
I was on Tinian.
Tinian, same
Yeah.
thing. When war in Europe ended, were you?
Oh, in the
you
war
were
in Tinian, I was in Wendover, Utah at that time.
Utah.
Yeah.
How was this feeling of this war in Europe? Now,
I-
in Russia, of course, its war is over. That's it. In America, was not as because you still
That's
have
right,
war.
that's
How
right,
how
that's
was
right.
feeling still?
Well, we were all happy and everything at that time, but it didn't make any difference to us because we knew we had to go. So we had to go subdue Japan and defeat Japan yet. So to us, it was just going from one war to another war.
Mm-hmm.
An entirely different type of war. The Navy was over there, and the war generally fought the war over there, and the airplanes were entirely different and everything else. It wasn't until we got Okinawa and Jimmy Doolittle was taking his 8th Air Force all out of England to put them onto Okinawa, and then we had then it was Japan was within range of the B-17. By that time, we had so many airplanes over there. A mouse would not have been able to move in Tokyo without being bombed. We had so many airplanes over there. The Japanese were defeated long before we dropped the atomic bomb.
Yeah, basically same thing as England saved Japan. It's a island, you
Yeah.
know. Otherwise, but you still a lot of casualties was be expected if landing happened.
Oh, hey, I saw the hospitals they were building on Tinian. They were building tremendously large hospitals to take care of the casualties if we had to invade Japan.
Basically, it saved more lives than this bombing and everything.
Yep, that's-
it's reasonable for reasonable
Yep.
people understanding. But
The kids today don't understand that. The kids today don't really know much about the atomic bomb except that it killed a lot of people.
all right, I'm done with this thing. Do you have anything left from the Enola Gay scrap of metal or something?
Nope,
Nothing.
not a thing.
Was not allowed, or you're just not interested
just-
in this?
I just I wasn't interested in it, number one. If I had any of it, I've already given it to Bob Kraus and people, historians
Yeah, a
and
long
people
time
like
ago.
that.
Anything left for your something that you have with you during the war?
Nope,
I remember.
not a thing.
Yeah, like you told me you sold your Colt, yeah?
Yep.
A lot. And I read that you have a logbook or something. What is it from Enola Gay?
The logbook, I'll give you a copy of it, just a minute, I'll go
But
get it.
was it? Can you take it with you? Isn't not an army GI? You know,
Nope.
property.
After the war, the army didn't want it, they threw it away.
Oh, they throw away airplanes, of
Yeah,
course.
that's right.
Not just books.
But I have a copy of that log. Just a minute, I'll give it to you here. I'll tell you what, come on with me, and I will walk around here and I'll show you some of the things the only things I have are things I want. And that's a picture of the Enola Gay up there now. Been painted by Bill Phillips, and that's, on the bottom is the boxcar. Here, I'll move this out of your way and you can get them. Ooh, geez, that's heavier than I thought.
Just
Then over here we have a picture of our B-17, the Red Gremlin. Also painted by Bill Phillips. Turn on some lights here and you might get a little bit better anyhow. That's our B-7, and we picked that airplane. We had 3 airplanes shot up in our first 6 missions, and then we got this one. And you notice the tail number is 44444. And he says, hey, that's a winning poker hand. It was never shot down or shot up. Then in here are some more